My mother, Irma Hill.
Miss Hill,
My mother is going to celebrate her 80th birthday on the 16th.
happy birthday in advance.
My sister, my eldest sister, Aretha Lee is here. My sister Joanne Fennell. My sister Carly Gilchrist. My sister Joyce Baird.
I welcome you all. I'm sorry.
My brother Ray Hill.
Thank you, Professor.
I would, al-
Please.
I would also like to introduce my counsel at this time.
Yes, that'd be appropriate.
Mr. Gardner, Ms. Susan Ross, and Mr. Charles Ogletree.
Thank you. Now, Professor, thank you for your statement and your introductions. And I think it's important that the committee understand a little more about your background and your work experience before we get into the specific allegations that you have made in your statement. I understand, as you've just demonstrated, you come from a large family, and I've been told that you've indicated you're the youngest in the family. Is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Now, I assume that, like all families, they've been of great help and assistance to you. Let me ask you, tell me again your educational background for the record.
I went to primary, elementary, and secondary school in Okmulgee County, in Morris High School, Morris Junior High, and Urim Grade School, in reverse order. I went to Oklahoma State University starting in 1973 and graduated in 1977 from Oklahoma State University with a degree in psychology. In 1977, I began attending Yale Law School. I graduated, received my JD degree from there in 1980.
Now, what was your first job after graduation from law school?
I worked at the firm of Wald, Harkrader, and Ross.
How did you acquire the job? And that is a Washington law firm.
That is a Washington, D.C. law firm.
And how did you acquire that job?
Through the interviewing process, the first interview took place at Yale Law School. I was interviewed for that job. I don't remember the names of the interviewers. I was called to Washington for an interview in the office of Wald, Harkrader, and Ross. I was interviewed by a number of people, and I accepted an appointment with them. Now, I will say that that interview process was preceded by work that I had done with them as a summer associate. And so the interview process the second time around was really, actually I'll say that the interview process took place before the summer associateship. And then at the end of that summer associateship, I was asked to work there full time.
Who was your immediate supervisor when you were at that law firm?
Well, a number of individuals, I worked with a number of different attorneys on different projects.
So it would depend upon the project you were working on.
Yes.
Now, what type of work did you do while you were at the law firm? Was it specialized, or did you do whatever was asked of you of any department?
Well, since I worked there for only 1 year. I was a fairly new associate. Most of my work was basically what was available and when I had time available to do it. However, I did some federal trade work. I did some environmental law work there, and I participated in the drafting of a manual on banking law while I was there.
Now, did you decide you wanted to leave that law firm, or was it suggested to you?
It was never.
Did someone approach you and say there's another job you might like, or did you indicate that you would like to leave the law firm and seek another job?
I was interested in seeking other employment. It was never suggested to me at the firm that I could leave the law firm in any way.
How old were you at this time?
At the time, I was 24 years old.
Now, why were you dissatisfied at the law firm? Why did you want to leave?
Well, I left the law firm because I wanted to pursue other practice other than basically the commercial practice, civil practice that was being done at the law firm. I was not dissatisfied with the quality of the work or the challenges of the work. I thought that I would be more personally fulfilled if I pursued other fields of the law.
Now, again, were you approached as to the opportunity at the Department of Education, or were you aware that there was a potential opening and you sought it out?
I spoke only with Clarence Thomas about the possibility of working at the...
Excuse me. How did you get to Clarence Thomas? That is my question.
I was introduced to him by a mutual friend.
Was a mutual friend a member of the law firm for which you worked?
Yes, his name is Gilbert Hardy. He was a member of the firm which I worked, Waldhart Trader and Law.
So you had expressed to Mr. Hardy that you would like to move into government or move out of the practice. Were you specific in what you would wanted to do?
I told him only that I was interested in pursuing something other than private practice.
Now, some of the activities of the Office of Civil Rights at the time were pretty controversial. We heard testimony, in fact, about the fact the office was under a court order to change its practice for carrying out its duties, and some have suggested that Mr. Thomas had done an exemplary job in changing things. Some have suggested otherwise. Did the controversy surrounding the office detract from your interest in taking this job, or did you consider it?
I certainly considered it. I considered the fact that there was talk about abolishing the office. I considered all of those things, but I saw this as an opportunity to do some work that I may not get at another time.
Did you think this was a good job?
Pardon me?
Did you view this as a good job, or did you view this as an intermediate step?
I viewed it as a good job, yes.
Can you describe for the committee your duties, initial duties, when you arrived at the office of at the Department of Education and doing in the civil rights area? What were your duties?
My duties were really special projects and special research. A lot of the special projects involved commenting on Office for Civil Rights policies. It involved doing research on education issues as they related to socioeconomic factors and so forth.
Was Judge Thomas your direct supervisor? Did you report to anyone else but Judge Thomas at the time?
I reported only to Judge Thomas.
So at the Department of Education, your sole and immediate supervisor was Judge Thomas?
Yes.
And what was your title?
Attorney advisor.
Attorney advisor. Now, did you have reason to interact with Judge Thomas in that capacity very often during the day?
We interacted regularly.
Did you attend meetings with Judge Thomas?
I would attend some meetings, but not all of the meetings that he attended.
Perhaps you'd be willing to describe to the committee what a routine workday was at that phase of your career, working with Judge Thomas.
Well, I'm not sure that there were any such thing as a routine workday. Some days I would go in. I might be asked to respond to letters that Judge Thomas had received. I might be asked to look at memos that had come from the various offices in the Office for Civil Rights. If there was a meeting which Judge Thomas needed to attend, that he wanted someone there to take information or to help him with information, I might be asked to do that.
Where was your office physically located relative to Judge Thomas's office?
His office was set off down the hall from mine. Inside his set of offices, there was a desk for his secretary, and then his office was behind closed doors. My office was down the hall. It was separated from his office.
Can you describe to us how it was that you came to move over to the EEOC with Judge Thomas?
Well, my understanding, uh, I did not have much notice that Judge Thomas was moving over to the EEOC. My understanding from him at that time was that I could go with him to the EEOC, that I did not have, since I was his special assistant, that I did not have a position at the Office for Education, but that I was welcome to go to the EEOC with him. It was a very tough decision because this behavior had occurred. However, at the time that I went to the EEOC, there was a period, or prior to the time we went to the EEOC, there was a period where the incidents had ceased. And so after some consideration of the job opportunities in the area, as well as the fact that I was not assured that my job at the education was going to be protected, I made a decision to move to the EEOC.
Were you not assured of that because you were a political appointee, or were you not assured of it because, tell me why you felt you weren't assured of that?
Well, there were two reasons, really. One, I was a special assistant of a political appointee, and therefore I assumed and I was told that that position may not continue to exist. I didn't know who was going to be taking over the position. I had not been interviewed to become the special assistant of the new individual. I assumed that they would want to hire their own, as Judge Thomas had done. In addition, the Department of Education at that time was scheduled to be abolished. There had been a lot of talk about it, and at that time it was truly considered to be on its way out. And so for a second reason, I could not be certain that I would have a position there.
Now, when you moved over to EEOC, can you recall for us, to the best of your ability, how that offer came about? Did you inquire of Judge Thomas whether or not you could go to EEOC? Did he suggest it? Do you recall?
I recall that when the appointment at the EEOC became firm, that I was called into his office, and I believe Diane Holt was there too. And Diane Holt was his secretary at Education. We were there, and he made the announcement about the appointment and assured us that we could go to the EEOC with him.
Now, when you went to EEOC, what were your duties there at EEOC?
Well, my duties were really varied because it was a much larger organization. There were so many more functions of the organization. My primary duties were to the office of being the liaison to the Office of Congressional Affairs and the Office of Review and Appeal, so that I reviewed a number of the cases that came up on appeal to make certain our office had given proper consideration. I acted as a liaison to the press, sometimes for the chairman's office through Congressional Affairs and Public Relations. I had some additional responsibilities as special projects came along.
Did you have as much occasion to interact personally with Judge Thomas at EEOC as you had with him at the Department of Education?
No. We were much busier. We were all much busier, and the work that we did was work that did not necessarily require as much interaction. A lot of times at the Education Department, the work required there were policy decisions that were to be made, and we were trying to do an evaluation of the program. So there was more interaction at that time. At EEOC, there were just projects that had to get out, and so there was less of an opportunity for interaction.
Who was your immediate supervisor at EEOC?
At the EEOC, initially, Clarence Thomas was my immediate supervisor. After a period, Allison Duncan was appointed to be the director of the staff. Initially, the staff consisted of 2 special assistants, myself and Carlton Stewart. The staff eventually grew to a larger number of assistants, and Allison Duncan was brought up from the legal counsel's office to take control of that situation.
Now, how long were you at EEOC with Judge Thomas before Allison Duncan became the chief of staff?
I don't recall.
Once she became the chief of staff, is she the person who gave you assignments most often and to whom you reported most often?
That's right. Occasionally at the staff meeting, assignments would be given out, but that was held only one day of the week. So during the rest of the week, when things came up, Allison was in charge of giving out assignments.
Now, did the judge's chief of staff report directly to him, or did she have an intermediate supervisor?
No, she reported directly to him, as I understand.
Who prepared your performance evaluation?
I understood that Judge Thomas prepared the performance evaluation.
Did the chief of staff, to the best of your knowledge, have the power to fire you?
Not to my knowledge.
Who had that power?
Judge Thomas.
Was there anyone else at EEOC that you believe possessed that power?
No, not for that office.
Was Judge Thomas then still your ultimate boss and the boss of the entire office?
Yes.
Now, was there any routine workday at EEOC that you could describe for the committee?
Actually, most of the work that we did, unlike at education, most of the work was responding to internal memos instead of responding to things that had come from outside. There were many more of those because there were many more offices. And so each of us who were responsible for a certain area would respond to a memo or write up a memo to be sent to the chairman for his response. We also had hearings, and there was always a special assistant who was assigned to sit in the commission hearing. And so on some days, if we were having hearings, well, one of the special assistants, very often it was me, would sit in the hearing to provide the chairman with information. On the week, or during the days of the week that we weren't having hearings, we had to prepare the chairman for the hearings themselves, so that we had to go through the file on the hearing and the records and brief the chairman on those, or write memos and brief to the chairman on them.
Professor, you've testified that you had regular contact with Judge Thomas at the Department of Education, and you've just described the extent of your contact with Judge Thomas at EEOC. And you've described your professional interaction with him. Now, I must ask you now to describe once again and more fully the behavior that you have alleged he engaged in while your boss, which you say went beyond the professional conventions and were unwelcome to you. Now, I know these are difficult to discuss, but you must understand that we have to ask you about them. Professor, did some of the attempts at conversation that you have described in your opening statement occur in your office or in his office?
Some occurred in his office. Some comments were made in mine. Most often they were in his office.
Did all of the behavior that you have described to us in your written statement to the committee, in your oral statement now, and what you have said to the FBI, did all of that behavior take place at work?
Yes, it did.
Now, I'd like you to go back.
Let me clarify that. If you're including a luncheon during the work day to be at work, yes.
Well, I'm just trying to determine, it was in what you could describe and you believe to be part of the work day.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask you, where did each of these events occur? If you can, to the best of your ability, I'd like you to recount for us where each of the allegations that you have mentioned in your opening statement, each of the incidences occurred, physically where they occurred.
Well, I remember 2 occasions these incidents occurred at lunch.
Remember which of those incidences were at lunch, Judge? Professor? Well, let me ask this, as an antecedent question. Were you always alone when the alleged conversations would begin, or the alleged statements by Judge Thomas would begin?
Well, and when the incidents occurred in the cafeterias, we were not alone. There were other people in the cafeteria but because of the way the tables were set, or there were few individuals who were in the immediate area of the conversation.
Those incidences that occurred other than in the cafeteria, those incidences occurred in his office. Can you tell me what incidences occurred, of the ones you described to us, occurred in his office?
Well, I recall specifically that the incident about the Coke can occurred in his office at the EEOC.
And what was that incident again?
The incident with regard to the Coke can, it's spelled out in my statement.
Once again for me, please.
The incident involved his going to his desk, getting up from a work table, going to his desk, looking at this can and saying, "Who put pubic hair on my Coke?"
Was anyone else in his office at the time?
No.
Was the door closed?
I don't recall.
Are there any other incidences that occurred in his office with guests, in his office, period?
There is, I recall at least one instance in his office at the EEOC where he discussed some pornographic material, or he brought up the substance or the content of pornographic material.
Again, it's difficult, but for the record, what substance did he bring up in this instance at EEOC in his office? What was the content of what he said?
Well, this was a reference to an individual who had a very large penis, and he used the name that he had been referred to in the pornographic material.
Do you recall what it was?
Yes, I do. The name that was referred to was Long Dong Silver.
Were you working on any matter when in that context, or you just were called into the office? Do you remember what the circumstance of you being in an office on that occasion?
Very often, I went in to report on memos that I had written. I'm sure that that's why I was in the office. What happened generally was that I would write a note to Clarence Thomas, and he would call me in to talk about what I had written to him. And I believe that's what happened on that occasion.
Let's go back to the first time you alleged Judge Thomas indicated he had more than a professional interest in you. Do you recall what the first time was, and what he, with as much precision as you can, what he said to you?
As I recall, it either happened at lunch or it happened in his office when he said to me very casually, "You ought to go out with me sometime."
You ought to, or you are to?
You ought to.
Was that the extent at that incident?
That was the extent of that incident. At that incident, I declined, and at that incident, I think he may have said something about, he couldn't understand why I wouldn't want to go out with him, and the conversation may have ended.
Can you describe for the committee how you felt at that time when he asked you out? What was your reaction?
Well, my reaction at that time was a little surprised because I had not indicated to him in any way that I knew that I was interested in dating him. We had developed a good working relationship. It was cordial and it was very comfortable. So I was surprised that he was interested in something else.
With regard to the other incidences, and my time is running down, and I will come back to them. But with regard to the other incidences that you have mentioned in your opening statement, can you tell us how you felt at the time? Were you uncomfortable? Were you embarrassed? Did it not concern you? How did you feel about it?
The pressure to go out with him, I felt embarrassed about because I had given him an explanation that I thought it was not good for me as an employee working directly for him to go out. I thought he didn't take seriously my decision to say no, and that he did not respect my having said no to him. The conversations about sex, I was much more embarrassed and humiliated by. The two combined really made me feel sort of helpless in a job situation because I really wanted to do the work that I was doing. I enjoyed that work. But I felt that was being put in jeopardy by the other things that were going on in the office. And so I was really, really very troubled by it and distressed over it.
Can you tell the committee what was the most embarrassing of all the incidences that you have alleged?
I think the one that was the most embarrassing was this discussion of pornography involving women with large breasts and engaged in variety of sex with different people or animals. That was the thing that embarrassed me the most and made me feel the most humiliated.
He can. In his words, not yours, in his words, can you tell us what on that occasion he said to you? You have described the essence of the conversation. In order for us to determine, can you tell us in his words what he said?
I really cannot quote him verbatim. I can remember something like, you really ought to see these films that I've seen, or this material that I've seen. This woman has this kind of breast, a breast that measures this size, and they've got her in there with all kinds of things. She's doing all kinds of different sex acts, and that kind of, those were the kinds of words where he expressed his enjoyment of it and seemed to try to encourage me to enjoy that kind of material as well.
Did he indicate why he thought you should see this material?
No.
Why do you think? What was your reaction? Why did you think he was saying these things to you?
Well, coupled with the pressure about going out with him, I felt that implicit in this discussion about sex was the offer to have sex with him, not just to go out with him. There was never any explicit thing about going out to dinner or going to a particular concert or movie. It was, we ought to go out, And given his other conversations, I took that to mean we ought to have sex, or we ought to look at these pornographic movies together.
Professor, at your press conference, one of your press conferences, you said that the issues that you raised about Judge Thomas, you referred to it as an ugly issue. Is that how you view these conversations?
Yes, they were very ugly. They were very dirty. They were disgusting.
Were any one of these conversations, this is my last question, my time is up, were any one of these conversations, other than being asked to go out, were any one of them repeated more than once? The same conversation, reference to...
The reference to his own physical attributes was repeated more than once, yes.
Now again, for the record, did he just say, I have great physical capability and attributes, or was he more graphic?
He was much more graphic.
Can you tell us what he said?
Well, I can tell you that he compared his penis size. He measured his penis in terms of length, those kinds of comments.
Thank you. My time is up under our agreement. By the way, I might state for the agreement, once again, we've agreed that we will go back and forth a half hour of conversation on each side, at which time, when the principal's finished asking questions, that members who have not been designated to ask questions, since all have been keenly involved and interested in this on both sides, will have an opportunity to ask questions for 5 minutes. But let me now yield to my friend from Pennsylvania, Senator Specter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Hill, I have been asked to question you by Senator Thurman, the ranking Republican, but I do not regard this as an adversary proceeding, and my duties run to the people of Pennsylvania who have elected me, and in the broader sense, as a United States Senator, to constitutional government and the Constitution. And my purpose, as the purpose of the hearing generally, is to find out what happened.
Certainly.
We obviously have a matter of enormous importance from a lot of points of view. The integrity of the court is very important, that the Supreme Court not have any member who is tainted or not have a cloud. And in our society, we can accept unfavorable decisions from the court if we think they're fairly arrived at.
Senator, excuse me for interrupting, but some of our colleagues on this end can't hear you. Can you pull that closer? I know it makes it
I have done that carefully, Chairman, to avoid that.
Well, you're succeeded, Senator.
You can hear me all right, can't you, Professor Hill?
Yes, I can.
But I was just saying about the importance of the court, where there should be a feeling of confidence in the fairness of decisions, because parties can take unfavorable decisions if they think they're being treated fairly. I think this hearing is very important to the Senate, to this committee, because by 20/20 hindsight, we should have done this before. And obviously, it's of critical importance to Judge Thomas and you, whose reputations and careers are on the line. It's not easy to go back to events which happened almost a decade ago to find out what happened. Very, very difficult to do. I would start, Professor Hill, with one of your more recent statements, at least according to a man by the name of Carlton Stewart, who says that he met you in August of this year, ran into you at the American Bar Association convention presence of Stanley Grayson, quote, how great Clarence's nomination was and how much he deserved it, unquote. We went on to discuss Judge Thomas and our tenure at EEOC. For an additional 30 minutes or so, there was no mention of sexual harassment or anything negative about Judge Thomas stated during that conversation, and there's a statement from Stanley Grayson corroborating what Carlton Stewart has said. My question is, did Mr. Stewart accurately state what happened with you at that meeting?
As I recall, at that meeting, I did see Carlton Stewart, and we did discuss the nomination. Carlton Stewart was very excited about the nomination and said, I believe that those are his words, how great it was that Clarence Thomas had been nominated. I only said that it was a great opportunity for Clarence Thomas. I did not say that it was a good thing, that this nomination was a good thing. I might add that I have spoken with newspaper reporters and have gone on record as saying that I have some doubts and some questions about the nomination. However, in that conversation where I was faced with an individual who was elated about the probability of his friend being on the Supreme Court, I did not want to insult him or argue with him at that time about the issue. So I was very passive in the conversation.
Excuse me?
I was very passive in the conversation.
So that Mr. Stewart and Mr. Grayson are simply wrong when they say, and this is a quotation from Mr. Stewart, that you said specifically how great his nomination was and how much he deserved it. They're just wrong.
The latter part is certainly wrong. I did say that it is a great opportunity for Clarence Thomas. I did not say that he deserved it.
We have a statement from former Dean of Oral Roberts Law School, Roger Tuttle, who quotes you as saying that laudatory comments about Judge Thomas as a fine man and an excellent legal scholar, and in the course of 3 years when Dean Tuttle knew you at the law school, that you had always praised him and had never made any derogatory comments. Is Dean Tuttle correct?
During the time that I was at Oral Roberts University, I realized that Charles Posey, who was the founding dean of that school, had very high regards for Clarence Thomas. I did not risk talking in disparaging ways about Clarence Thomas at that time. I don't recall any specific conversation about Clarence Thomas in which I said anything about his legal scholarship. I don't really know of his legal scholarship, certainly at that time.
Well, I can understand it if you didn't say anything, but Dean Tuttle makes a specific statement. His words are that you said, quote, the most laudatory comments, unquote.
I have no response to that because I don't know exactly what he is saying.
There is a question about Phyllis Berry, who was quoted in the New York Times on October 7th, quote, in an interview, Ms. Berry suggested that the allegations, referring to your allegations, were a result of Ms. Hill's disappointment and frustration that Mr. Thomas did not show any sexual interest in her, close quote. You were asked about Ms. Berry at the interview on October 9th, and a reporter to have said, well, I don't know Phyllis Berry, and she doesn't know me, and there are quite a few people who have come forward to say that they saw you and Miss Berry together and that you knew each other very well.
I would disagree with that. Ms. Berry worked at the EEOC. She did attend some staff meetings at the EEOC. We were not close friends. We did not socialize together. And she has no basis for making a comment about my social interests with regard to Clarence Thomas or anyone else. I might add that at the time that I had had an active social life and that I was involved with other people.
Did Ms. Anna Jenkins and Ms. J.C. Alvarez, who both have provided statements attesting to the relationship between you and Ms. Berry, a friendly one where Ms. Berry would have known you, were both Ms. Jenkins and Ms. Alvarez co-workers in a position to observe your relationship with Ms. Berry?
They were both workers at the EEOC. And I can only say that they were commenting on our relationship in the office. It was cordial and friendly. We were not unfriendly with each other, but we were not social acquaintances. We were professional acquaintances.
So that when you said Ms. Berry doesn't know me and I don't know her, you weren't referring to just that, but some intensity of knowledge?
Well, this is a specific remark about my sexual interest. And I think one has to know another person very well to make those kinds of remarks unless they are very openly expressed.
Well, did Ms. Berry observe you and Judge Thomas together in the EEOC office?
Yes, at staff meetings where she attended, and at the office, yes.
Let me pick up on Senator Biden's line of questioning. You referred to the, quote, oddest episode I remember, and then talked about the Coke incident. When you made your statement to the FBI, why was it that that was omitted if it was so strong in your mind and such an odd incident?
I spoke to the FBI agent and I told them the nature of the comment and did not tell them more specifics. I referred to the specific comments that were in my statement.
Well, when you talked to the FBI agents, you did make specific allegations about specific sexual statements made by Judge Thomas.
Yes.
So that your statement to the FBI did have specifics, and my question to you, why, if this was such an odd episode, wasn't it included when you talked to the FBI?
I don't know.
I'd like you to take a look, if you would, at your own statement in the first full paragraph of page 5 on the last line and ask you why that was not included in your statement to the FBI.
Excuse me, my copy is not this. Did you refer to that passage?
Yes, of course. Referring to page 5 of the statement which you provided to the committee, there's a strong allegation in the last sentence. And my question to you is, why didn't you tell that to the FBI?
When the FBI investigation took place, I tried to answer their questions directly as I recall. I was very uncomfortable talking to the agent about these instances. I am very uncomfortable now, but I feel that it is necessary. The FBI agent told me that it was regular procedure to come back and ask for more specifics if it was necessary. And so At that time, I did not provide all of the specifics that I could have.
Professor Hill, I can understand that it's uncomfortable, and I don't want to add to that. And if any of it is something you want to pause about, please do. You testified this morning in response to Senator Biden that the most embarrassing question involved, this is not too bad, women's large breasts. That's a word we use all the time. That was the most embarrassing aspect of what Judge Thomas had said to you.
No, the most embarrassing aspect was his description of the act of these individuals, these women, the acts that those particular people would engage in. It wasn't just the breast. It was the continuation of his story about what happened in those films with the people with this characteristic, physical characteristic.
With the physical characteristic of?
The large breast.
Well, in your statement to the FBI, you did refer to the films, but there's no reference to the physical characteristic you described. I don't want to attach too much weight to it, but I had thought you said that the aspect of the large breast was the aspect that concerned you, and that was missing from the statement to the FBI.
Then I have been misunderstood. It wasn't the physical characteristic of having large breasts. It was the description of the acts that this person with this characteristic would do, the acts that they would engage in, group acts, acts with animals, things of that nature involving women.
Professor Hill, I'd like you now to turn to page 3 of your statement that you submitted to the committee we got just this morning. And the last sentence on the first full paragraph, you again make on that statement a very serious allegation as to Judge Thomas, and I would ask you why you didn't tell the FBI about that when they interviewed you.
I suppose my response would be the same. I did not tell the FBI all of the information. The FBI agent made clear that if I were embarrassed about talking about something, that I could decline to discuss things that were too embarrassing, but that I could provide as much information as I felt comfortable with at that time.
Well, now, did you decline to discuss with the FBI anything on the grounds that it was too embarrassing?
There were no particular questions that were asked. He asked me to describe the kinds of incidents that had occurred as graphically as I could without being embarrassed. I did not explain everything. I agree that all of this was not disclosed in the FBI investigation.
Was it easier for you because one of the FBI agents was a woman, or did you ask at any time that you give the statements to her alone in the absence of the man FBI agent?
No, I did not do that. I didn't ask to disclose. I did not.
Well, I understand from what you're saying now that you were told that you didn't have to say anything because if it was too embarrassing for you. But my question to you is, did you use that at any point to decline to give any information on the ground that it was too embarrassing?
I never declined to answer a question because it was too embarrassing. No, he asked me to describe the incident, and rather than decline to make any statement at all, I described them to my level of comfort.
Well, you described a fair number of things in the FBI statement, but I come back now to the last sentence on page 3, the first full paragraph because it's a strong allegation, and now you have said that you had not omitted that because of its being embarrassing, or you might have said even something embarrassing to the female agent. And my question to you is why was that omitted?
Senator, at the time of the FBI investigation, I cooperated as fully as I could at that time, and I cannot explain why anything in specific was not stated.
Professor Hill, you testified that you drew an inference that Judge Thomas might want you to look at pornographic films, but you told the FBI specifically that he never asked you to watch the films. Is that correct?
He never said, let's go to my apartment and watch films or go to my house and watch films. He did say, you ought to see this material.
But when you testified that, as I wrote it down, quote, we ought to look at pornographic movies together, that was an expression of what was in your mind.
That was the inference that I drew, yes, with his pressing me for social engagement, yes.
That something he might have wanted you to do, but the fact is, flatly, he never asked you to look at pornographic movies with him.
With him? No, he did not.
I don't want
I'd rather not.
no, to determine whether or not the witness ever saw the FBI report. Does she know what was stated by the FBI about her conversation?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking her about what she said to the FBI.
I'm just asking it. Have you ever seen the FBI report?
No, I have not.
Thank you.
Would you like to take a few moments to look at it now?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Let's make a copy of the FBI report. I
think we have to be careful to
Senator-
make sure
Senator
the
Grassley
FBI
asked me to
report
make sure
only as
that-
it pertains, maybe you could continue, only as it pertains to her. We're not at liberty to give to her what the FBI said about other individuals.
I was asking you, Professor Hill, about the FBI report, obviously because the portion I'm questioning you about relates to their recording what you said, and I think it's fair, one lawyer to another.
No, I would continue
ask about
because
it.
you are not asking her directly. I just wanted to know whether or not her responses were at all based upon her knowledge of what the FBI said she said. That's all I was asking.
Well, she's asked to see it, and I think it's a fair request, and I would be glad to take a moment's delay to...
This is the
have her look
FBI
at it.
report as it references Professor Hill, only Professor Hill.
May we stop the clock, Mr.
Yes, we
Chairman?
will. We'll turn the clock back and give the senator additional time. I will not ask how long to turn it back. I'll leave that decision to Senator Simpson. Senator Simpson.
I'll be watching, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Make sure it's 10 minutes. That was not to hurry you along, Professor. That was to ask for silence in the room. The only point I wish to make is that you know what's in the report and understand the report is a summary of your conversation, not a transcription of your conversation. Momentary break. The senator has 10 or more minutes remaining, and at the conclusion of his questioning, we'll recess for lunch for an hour, and then begin with Senator Leahy. Whatever, an hour from the time.
I see. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that part. Thank you.
All right. Have you had a chance to peruse it?
Yes.
Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
I apologize to my colleagues for the interruption.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Hill, now that you have read the FBI report, you can see that it contains no reference to any mention of Judge Thomas's private parts or sexual prowess or size, etc. And my question to you would be on something that is as important as it is in your written testimony and in your responses to Senator Biden, why didn't you tell the FBI about that?
Senator, in paragraph 2 on page 2 of the report, it says that he likes to discuss specific sex acts and frequency of sex. And I'm not sure what all that summarizes, but his sexual prowess, his sexual preferences could have.
Which line are you referring to, Professor?
The very last line in paragraph 2 of page 2.
Well, that says, quote, this is not too bad, I can read it, Thomas liked to discuss specific sex acts and frequency of sex, close quote. Now, are you saying, in response to my question as to why you didn't tell the FBI about the size of his private parts and his sexual prowess and Long John Silver, that information was comprehended within the statement, quote, Thomas liked to discuss specific sex acts and frequency of sex?
I am not saying that information was included in that. I don't know that it was. I don't believe that I even mentioned the latter information to the FBI agent. And I could only respond again that at the time of the investigation, I tried to cooperate as fully as I could to recall information to answer the questions that they asked.
Professor Hill, you said that you took it to mean that Judge Thomas wanted to have sex with you, but in fact he never did ask you to have sex, correct?
No, he did not ask me to have sex. He did continually pressure me to go out with him, continually, and he would not accept my explanation as one being valid.
So that when you said you took it to mean we ought to have sex, that was an inference
Yes.
that you drew.
Yes.
Professor Hill, the USA Today reported on October 9th, quote, Anita Hill was told by Senate staffers she signed affidavit alleging sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas. Anita Hill was told by Senate staffers her signed affidavit alleging sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas would be the instrument that, quote, quietly and behind the scenes, close quote, would force him to withdraw his name. Was USA Today correct on that, attributing it to a man named Mr. Keith Henderson, a 10-year friend of Hill and former Senate Judiciary Committee staffer?
I do not recall. I guess, did I say that?
Let me-
I don't understand who said what.
Let me
from
go
that
on. He
quotation.
said, Keith Henderson, a 10-year friend of Hill and former Senate Judiciary Committee staffer, says Hill was advised by Senator staffers that her charge would be kept secret and her name kept from public scrutiny. Quote, they would, apparently referring again to Mr. Henderson's statement, quote, they would approach Judge Thomas with the information and he would withdraw and not turn this into a big story, close quote, Henderson said. Did anybody ever tell you that by providing the statement that there would be a move to press Judge Thomas to withdraw his nomination?
I don't recall any story about using this to press anyone.
Well, do you recall anything at all about anything related to that?
I think that I was told that my statement would be shown to Judge Thomas, and I agreed to that.
But was there any suggestion, however slight, that the statement with these serious charges would result in a withdrawal so that it wouldn't have to be necessary for your identity to be known or for you to come forward under circumstances like these?
There was no, not that I recall. I don't recall anything being said about him being pressed to resign.
Well, this would only have happened in the course of the past month or so, because all this started just in early September.
I understand.
So that when you say you don't recall, I would ask you to search your memory on this point, and perhaps we might begin, and this is an important subject, about the initiation of this entire matter with respect to the Senate staffers who talked to you. But that's going to be too long for the few minutes that I have left, so I would just ask you once again, when you say you don't recollect whether there was anything at all said to you by anyone that, as USA Today reports, that just by having the allegations of sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas, that it would be the instrument that, quote, quietly and behind the scenes, close quote, would force him to withdraw his name. Anything related to that in any way whatsoever?
The only thing that I can think of, and if you check, there were a lot of phone conversations. We were discussing this matter over very carefully. And at some point there might have been a conversation about what might happen. But there might have been, but it wasn't, I don't remember this specific kind of comment about quietly and behind the scenes pressing him to withdraw.
Well, aside from quietly and behind the scenes pressing him to withdraw, any suggestion that just the charges themselves in writing would result in Judge Thomas withdrawing, going away?
No. I don't recall that at all, no.
Well, you started to say that there might have been some conversation, and
there might have been some conversation about what could possibly occur.
Well, tell me about that conversation.
Well, I can't really tell you any more than what I said. I discussed what the alternatives were, what might happen with this affidavit that I submitted. We talked about possibility of the Senate committee coming back for more information. We talked about the possibility of the FBI going through the FBI and getting more information. Some questions from individual senators. The statement that you're referring to, I really can't verify.
Well, when you talk about the Senate coming back for more information, or the FBI coming back for more information, the senators coming back for more information, that has nothing to do at all with Judge Thomas withdrawing. So that when you had testified a few moments ago that there might possibly have been a conversation in response to my question about a possible withdrawal, I would press you on that, Professor Hill, in this context. You've testified with some specificity about what happened 10 years ago. I would ask you to press your recollection as to what happened within the last month.
And I have done that, Senator. And I don't recall that comment. I do recall that there might have been some suggestion that if the FBI did the investigation, that the Senate might get involved, that there may be that a number of things might occur. But I have to be honest with you. I cannot verify the statement that you're asking me to verify. There is not really more that I can tell you on that.
Well, when you say a number of things might occur, what sort of things?
May I just add this one thing?
Sure.
The nature of that kind of conversation that you're talking about is very different from the nature of the conversation that I recall. The conversations that I recall were much more vivid. They were more explicit. The conversations that I have had with the staff over the last few days in particular have become much more blurry. But these are vivid events that I recall from even 8 years ago when they happened. And they are going to stand out much more in my mind than a telephone conversation. They were one-on-one personal conversations, as a matter of fact, and that adds to why they are much more easily recalled. I am sure that there are some comments that I do not recall the exact nature of from that period as well. But these that are here are the ones that I do recall.
Well, Professor Hill, I can understand why you say that these comments, alleged comments, would stand out in your mind, and we've gone over those. I don't want to go over them again. But when you talk about the withdrawal of a Supreme Court nominee, talking about something that is very, very vivid, stark, and you're talking about something that occurred within the past 4 or 5 weeks. And my question goes to a very dramatic and important event. If a mere allegation would pressure a nominee to withdraw from the Supreme Court, I would suggest to you that that's not something that wouldn't stick in a mind for 4 or 5 weeks, if it happened.
Well, Senator, I would suggest to you that for me these are more than mere allegations, so that if that comment were made, these are the truth to me. These comments are the truth to me. And if it were made, then I may not respond to it in the same way that you do.
Well, I'm not questioning your statement when I use the word allegation to refer to 10 years ago. I just don't want to talk about it as a fact, because so far that's something we have to decide. So I'm not stressing that aspect of the question. I do with respect to the time period. But the point that I would come back to for just one more minute would be, well, let me ask it to you this way. Would you not consider it a matter of real importance if someone said to you, Professor, you won't have to go public, your name won't have to be disclosed, you won't have to do anything, just sign the affidavit, and this man, as the USA Today report, would be the instrument that, quote, quietly and behind the scenes, close quote, would force him to withdraw his name. Now, I'm not asking you whether it happened. I'm asking you now only if it did happen, whether that would be the kind of a statement to you which would be important and impressed upon you that you would remember in the course of 4 or 5 weeks.
I don't recall a specific statement, and I cannot say whether that comment would have stuck in my mind. I really cannot say that.
The sequence with the staffers is very involved, so I'm going to move to another subject now, but I want to come back to this. And over the luncheon break, I would ask you to think about it further, if there's any way you can shed any further light on that question, because I think it's an important one.
Thank you.
Professor Hill, the next subject I want to take up with you involves the kind of strong language which you say Judge Thomas used in a very unique setting where there you have the chairman of the EEOC, the nation's chief law enforcement officer on sexual harassment. And here you have a lawyer who's an expert in this field, later goes on to teach civil rights, and has a dedication to making sure that women are not discriminated against. And if you take the single issue of discrimination against women, the chairman of the EEOC has a more important role on that question even than a Supreme Court justice. Supreme Court justice is a more important position overall, but if you focus just on sexual harassment, and the testimony that you have described here today depicts a circumstance where the chairman of the EEOC is blatant, as you described it. And my question is, understanding the fact that you're 25 and that you're shortly out of law school and the pressures that exist in this world, and I know about it to a fair extent. I used to be a district attorney, and I know about sexual harassment and discrimination against women, and I think I have some sensitivity on it. But even considering all of that, given your own expert standing and the fact that here you have the chief law enforcement officer of the country on this subject, and the whole purpose of the civil rights laws being perverted right in the office of the chairman with one of his own female subordinates, what went through your mind, if anything, on whether you ought to come forward at that stage? Because if you had, you'd stop this man from being head of EEOC perhaps for another decade. What went on through your mind? I know you decided not to make a complaint, but did you give that any consideration? And if so, how could you allow this kind of reprehensible conduct to go on right in the headquarters without doing something about it?
Well, it was a very trying and difficult decision for me not to say anything further. I can only say that when I made the decision to just withdraw from the situation and not press a claim or charge against him, that I may have shirked a duty, a responsibility that I had. And to that extent, I confess that I am very sorry that I did not do something or say something. But at the time, that was my best judgment. Maybe it was a poor judgment, but it wasn't a dishonest and it wasn't a completely unreasonable choice that I made, given the circumstances.
My red light is on. Thank you very much, Professor Hill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Professor Hill. We'll adjourn until 2:15. Reconvene at 2:15.
A day of drama before the Senate Judiciary Committee, a day of riveting testimony from two witnesses. First, Judge Clarence Thomas appearing before the committee to defend his honor, to deny the allegations of sexual harassment made by Professor Anita Hill, who followed him into the witness chair and gave equally compelling testimony. Talking very dramatically about her relationship with Clarence Thomas, first at the Education Department, the Federal Education Agency, and later when he was chief of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the federal agency which is set up to fight sexual harassment. She gave some of the most candid testimony ever heard here on Capitol Hill. She talked about Clarence Thomas's approaches to her, describing, as she saw them, his sexual proclivities, his sexual prowess, saying that he made all kinds of sexual innuendos and comments and pursued her, and that all of this was quite embarrassing to her. It was a very, very explicit testimony, and as you heard just at the end, she was being challenged to explain more from Republican Senator Arlen Specter. And before that, Nina, we had Judge Thomas, and his testimony was also one of the highlights of today.
Yes, we had extremely compelling testimony from Judge Thomas as well. He said, "This is the person I have helped at every turn in the road since we met. She seemed to appreciate the continued cordial relationship that we had since day one. I cannot imagine anything that I can have said or did to Anita Hill that could have been mistaken for sexual harassment." He said, God has gotten me through the days since September 25th when the FBI first approached him about this, and God, he said, is my judge. I have never in all my life felt such hurt and pain, he said. The agony my family and I have been done a grave and irreparable injustice. During the past 2 weeks, he said, I have lost the belief that if I did my best, all would work out. I called upon the strength that helps me get out of pinpoints, and it was all sapped out of me. It was sapped out of me because Anita Hill was a person I considered a friend, whom I admired and thought I had treated fairly and with the utmost respect. Perhaps I could have better weathered this if it was from someone else, but here was someone I truly felt I had done my best with. Though I am by no means a perfect person, I have not done what she has alleged, and I still don't know what I could possibly have done to cause her to make these allegations.
So what we have here is dramatic evidence of what people have been saying, his word against her word. And when she took the witness chair, she told of her relationship with Clarence Thomas, that she had worked more closely with him at the Education Department. And then when she went to work at the EEOC, she said that she had hoped that he would stop his pursuit of her, that the good working relationship, as she characterized it, which they had had earlier, would continue. But she was embarrassed continuously by the pressure to go out with him, that he didn't take seriously her refusal, that she didn't want to really have any kind of serious man-woman relationship. She said this made it very troubling and very stressful on her when she was working at the EEOC.
There is no way, Paul, to reconcile these two accounts. One is a graphic description of what would be easily identifiable as sexual harassment in any court of law in this country. The other is a categorical denial of any such thing. These are simply irreconcilable. At this point, it's a matter of who you believe. It's just that simple. There's no fudge factor here. There's no misunderstanding here. This is a diametrical difference.
But the senators will, in their questioning of these two witnesses, will obviously explore what they see as inconsistencies in the stories that have been given by both, and also there will be supporting witnesses for either side who will be testifying as these hearings progress. This is the first day of these renewed hearings into the Clarence Thomas nomination to sit on the Supreme Court. Nina and I will be back at 2:15 Eastern Daylight Time to continue our special PBS NPR coverage. I'm Paul Duke with Nina Totenberg on Capitol Hill.
Funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the financial support of viewers like you.
This is PBS.
You have the best seat in the house for educational programs and quality entertainment with Channel 15, TV worth watching.
Hi, I'm Norm Abrams. Welcome to the New Yankee Workshop, where today we're going to build this English garden bench made of teak. Now, it looks like an ambitious project, and it is, but I know you can do it, and I'm going to show you how. Coming up next, right here on the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop features the craftsmanship of Norm Abrams and is made possible by Parks Corporation, makers of safe and simple, environmentally responsible stains and finishes that enrich, protect, and preserve the natural beauty of wood. Ace Hardware, helpful hardware men and women dedicated to providing service, selection, and friendly advice. The things you need and need to know. Ace is the place. And by
Vermont American. The blades, the bits, the tools to make American workmanship better. Vermont American. The power in power tool accessories.
Well, I didn't have the nerve to wear my plaid shirt here in London, and as you can see, I left my tool belt back at the shop. But I thought it would be the perfect place to find an authentic English garden bench. How's this one over here? A perfect example. Originally, they were made from English oak, but when all those trees were cut down, they went to teak, a perfect choice in this damp English weather. Now, if I can only find my tape measure, we could copy it. Before we get started, I'd like to reassure you that if you'd like to build an exact copy of today's project, that a measure drawing and a materials list are available. And you'll hear more about that before this program ends. Now I'd like to talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your tools. Knowing how to use your tools safely greatly reduces the possibility of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. Now I'll show you how I built today's project. Boy, that is tough stuff. Teak. And when it came time to build our garden bench, what other choice would there be? Especially after seeing how all those garden benches held up so well for decades without any maintenance. Now, it's expensive, and you're going to have to search around for it, but it's well worth it. I managed to find some rough teak and plane it down myself. Now, I learned a couple things about teak. It drills, saws, and sands beautifully. It's very predictable. But to plane it for thickness, it dulls planer blades quicker than you would believe. What I found out from reading in one of my wood books was that it contains silica, and that might be one of the reasons that it dulls the blade so quickly. Now, to get started on our project, I want to cut these shaped pieces, the curves in the front leg, the armrest, the back leg, and backrest, which is angled and curved at the top. So over here on my lumber rack, I have all the teak that I need to build the bench, cut approximately to the right size. And this piece has been laid out for one of the front legs. It's straight and then curved up at the top. I'm going to use my bandsaw to make the cuts, and I've set it up with a 1/4-inch blade. The reason I want to use a 1/4-inch blade is that some of the radius of the curves are fairly tight, and the narrower the blade, the easier it is to cut the curves. Now also, this particular cut runs straight for about 20 inches, and then it curves. So I've set up a rip fence to cut the straight portion, and when I reach the curve, I'll slide the fence out of the way and finish the cut. Cuts just like butter, or at least hard cheese. It's very predictable. And now I'll cut another one of these. Well, the next piece to cut are these armrests. I need 2 of these. It's the same thickness stock as the front leg was, but the layout is a little different. It's almost totally curved, no straight portions. Look at this piece. It has kind of an interesting grain effect right here, which I'm going to leave so they can see that when it's finished. Now, I have to cut this all freehand, no rip fence. What I like to do is just eyeball it. I want to get the blade so that it just leaves the line. And I don't want to make any mistakes with the price of this stuff. The next piece to make is this back leg backrest piece. And to make it, I need a piece of timber 4 by 6. Now, for those of you concerned where this teak comes from, I've been assured by my supplier that it was plantation grown, specifically for making projects like this, not stripped from a rainforest. Now, this piece has the angles and a curved top, and I can't really use my rip fence to help me, so I'm going to have to cut it all freehand. So I'm just going to take my time back at the bandsaw. Well, despite the fact that there are no intersecting joints on the back of this member, I still have to sand it smooth. I can't use the joiner, but I can use my belt sander. And I've clamped both of the members in the vise, and I'll just sand them together nice and smooth. All right, both of those surfaces line up pretty well. And now to finish off any areas that I couldn't do on the joiner or the belt sander, like these curves, these tight curves, I'm going to use my drill press, which is outfitted with this little drum sander. And I put some 100 grit paper on it. Well, that does a great job. And I'll use the drum sander for the rest of the parts as well. All the joinery on the bench is made with mortise and tenon. Here's a tenon, the corresponding mortise, and down here another mortise with the corresponding tenon. We choose this type of joinery because it's, with a little bit of glue and some dowels, it's extremely strong. Now, what I had to do first, though, was to lay out all the mortises very carefully on each piece following the plan and double-checking them before I start to clean them out. Now, to clean them out, I'm using my drill press set up with a 3/4-inch Forstner bit. That'll give me a nice flat bottom. Here's where this mortise wants to be, and the depth is set on the drill press so that it doesn't go all the way through. It'll stop at a predetermined depth. The idea is to remove as much material as possible with the bit so that I'll have less work chiseling it out later. Well, now it's time for some handwork. I need a 3/4-inch chisel and a 1-inch chisel. And this is the part of the job that takes some time
patience, and sharp tools. First thing I want to do is remove these little ridges. I really don't even need a mallet. A nice sharp chisel, and just shave it right down. Now this peak, it cuts so beautifully, I can't believe that just with a chisel and hand pressure, I can just shave it away. Now I'll switch to my 3/4-inch chisel. I'm using a 3/4-inch chisel because it's exactly the same width as my mortise. And I'll chisel out the remaining corners. Well, that looks pretty good. Only 19 more to go. But with all the mortises cut in the end members, I'm now ready to start working on the tenons, the part that fits into the mortise, on this bottom rail and on this piece up here, which is the top rail and the seat support. And I'll do that over on the table saw. Well, over here, I've attached a guide block to the ripped fence, and I'm going to use my miter gauge to push the stock through. Now, I've set it up so that the distance from the guide block to the outside edge of the blade is 1.5 inches, the length of my tenon. And the height of the blade has been set to 3/8 of an inch depth, the amount of material I want to remove. The next thing I want to do is make this shoulder cut right here. I don't have to change the fence, but I do have to lower the blade, and I'll use my prototype piece as a gauge. That should do it, and now I'll run all the pieces through. Well, that's one way to make these cheek cuts, just using the saw blade and nibbling away at it. It's time-consuming, but it's fairly accurate. Now I'm going to show you another way to make those cheek cuts. Now, this is a tenoning jig made by the manufacturer of this saw. Every manufacturer has their own version. Now, this one rides in the same slot as the miter gauge. It's heavy cast iron. It's very well built, and what it does is it allows you to hold pieces of wood in a vertical position, clamping them quickly with this clamp, and cutting very accurate tenons. But best of all, it's very safe. I've just removed the material along the narrow side of the tenon. Now, I could nibble that away, or I could use a hand saw to remove the material, but the band saw is just quicker. Have a look at the seat braces here in the middle, and these end rails. They have a slight curve downward to give the seat a nice, gentle look. And I've traced the outline on my rail, and that's another job for the bandsaw. Now it takes care of smoothing out that cut. Now I just want to dry fit the pieces together. This rail goes into that mortise. We take the front leg, and that slips on here. Now there's a couple more tenons that I have to make. I need one at the top of the front leg, and the mortise from the bottom of the armrest goes over that. And I need another tenon at the back of the armrest, and that fits into this mortise on the back of the rest. Now to cut these, I could cut them with the bandsaw, I could cut them by hand, or I could cut them with the table saw. But since I have a radial arm, I've set it up with a dado head cutter to just nibble away the material. Now that takes care of that side of the tenon. Now on the other side of the armrest is the corresponding angle. And in order to cut that, I'm going to have to swing my radial arm 12.5 degrees on the other side of 0. And I'll make sure that I keep the straight edge of the armrest up against the fence. The tenon that's at the top of the front leg is cut the same way. Now I just have to trim up the tenons using the bandsaw. Let's look back at our prototype again. In some cases where the mortises are at the same height, they intersect one another, and the tenons would hit each other unless I mitered them in the corners like this. So I'm going to use my power miter box to make that cut. I want to round over the top edge of this armrest so that it isn't sharp. I'll go along the top and come around and stop right about here because I don't want to go where my joint is. And to round that over, I'll simply use my router, which is set up with a 1/2-inch rounding over bit. Before I start my assembly, I have mixed up some waterproof glue. And that might seem like an extreme, but I want to use this as a precaution so that this bench is going to stay together forever. It's a 2-part mix. There's a resin and a catalyst, and once you put the two together and mix them up, you end up with a glue, once it's dried, that's impervious to water, insects, and even chemicals. Now, it's a little messy. You have to be careful using it. You can clean it up with water before it dries, and what you want to do is just use a brush and spread a little bit in the joints. You don't need very much because the joinery is fairly tight. Now I'll put a little bit of glue on the tenon. Now I can just slip the joint together. And in a minute, I'll put a dowel in to hold it all together. I'm going to wipe off any of that excess glue before it dries. Now, these clamps are really made just to hold the pieces tightly together and square while I drill for dowels. Now, for those dowels, I'm going to use a 3/8-inch brad point bit, and I've set up a collar here so I don't go all the way through the piece. I do want to go far enough through, though, so that I go through the tenon and into the other side of the mortise so it'll lock everything together. Okay, now I'm just going to take a nail and just put a little bit of this waterproof glue on it. Just dab a little inside the hole so that when I drive the dowel in, it'll get glued and it won't pop out later. Now for a dowel, 3/8-inch birch dowel. I'll trim the excess off later. Well, that takes care of the excess dowel that was sticking up. Note that I've removed the clamps. They're no longer necessary. The dowels will hold it together while the glue sets up. Now, those assemblies are joined together by a series of rails. The back has a top rail and a bottom rail with slats in between. And out front here, there's another rail at the front edge of the seat. Each rail fits into a mortise. So I need a tenon at the end of each rail, and I'll cut those over on the table saw like I did with the side rails. Now, this is a piece of 2x3, which is the bottom rail of the back. Using my guide block and my T-square, I'll make the shoulder cuts first. Well, I could finish off the tenon by nibbling it away, I suppose, but since I have enough height here in the shop and I've got my tenoning jig, this is the way to do it. Well, now I have to trim the narrow side of the tenon. And again, I could cut it by hand, but why waste the bandsaw when it's right here in the shop? In order for this back rail to fit into this mortise correctly, I'm going to have to miter the corner so that it'll intersect the miter of the other tenon. And I'll do that over here on my miter box. Now these are the two back rails, and I've laid out a series of mortises into which these slats will fit. They just float in there. They're not attached with any mechanisms or glue. And I could drill them out and chisel them by hand like I did on the prototype, but I want to show you this attachment for my drill press. It's a mortising attachment, and it comes with this fence, and then there's a bracket here which holds the wood down so as you lift the chisel out, it doesn't lift up. And there's a yoke right here into which fits a square chisel, and then you slide a drill bit into that. And as the drill press pushes down, the drill will start the hole, and the chisel will square it up. It's very quick, and it's accurate. Now, the first piece I want to work on is the top rail where the mortises go straight down. Boy, that works great. You know, when I did the other one by hand, it took me almost an hour to make the same number of mortises that I just did in 10 minutes. Now for a difficult part of the project, but a nice refinement for our garden bench. This bottom rail runs parallel to the lower portion of the leg here, as well as the top rail runs parallel to the backrest slant. Now I suppose I could twist this bottom rail so that the mortises for the slats would be straight in. But this little turn back down gives a lot of refinement to the project, but it means a little bit more work. Now what I have to do is figure out a way to drill the mortises at a 12.5-degree angle, which is the same as the angle we used on the armrest. So I've cut some wedges, one that sits in the bottom, that's 12.5 degrees, another one in the back, another one in the front. And what happens is the piece sits in like this, the mortise machine works straight down, yet it's setting the mortise at a 12.5-degree angle. And I'll do it the same way I did the top rail. Now I just want to round over the top of this top rail along the back, and the only thing I need to do that is a 1/2-inch round over bit set up in my router. Okay, let's assemble it. No dowels, no glue. Friction will take care of it. Well, this is a time you could use the help of 16 of your closest personal friends, one for every slat. But be patient, you'll get it all together. The bench has two intermediate supports with tenons that fit into mortises along the front rail. I'll cut that mortise next, and I'll use my drill press with the mortising attachment, except this time I won't use the fence, I'll just cut it freehand. Now I need to cut a tenon on the end of those intermediate supports to fit into those mortises. That's good. Now what I have to do is cut a notch in the other end of the piece where it meets the back rail, like this. And now the curve. Well, now it's time to assemble the bench. A little more waterproof glue on the tenons. I've already put some in the mortises. So now I should just be able to carefully slip these together and drive them down with my mallet. Now this is the front rail. I'll Slip that in this mortise. Now a little glue in the mortises of the other arm. This waterproof glue is great stuff, but you got to get it off, any excess off, with a wet rag before it hardens, or you'll never get it off. Good. Now let's see if the other side fits on. So as before, we'll pin it all together with some glue and some dowels. A little bit of glue on the tenon of this center support, and we'll slip that into the mortise. Now I'm just going to drill a hole down through the top and pin it with a dowel. Now here on the bottom side, where only the chipmunks are going to see it, I think I'll fasten this member with a screw because it'll hold better. Well, now we're ready for the seat. First slat to go on is this front one. And basically, it's even with the leg. Now, the back slat just butts up against the backrest. Now, for the center three slats, I just use this little spacer block to just space them out equally. Now, to fill these little counterbore holes, I've got a little trick. What I have here set up in my drill press is a plug cutter. It's really a bit that has a hollow core, and it'll bore out these little plugs. So I've taken a piece of teak to match the rest of the project, and after they're bored, you just take a screwdriver and you pop them out. You end up with a nice little teak plug. You bring it over, dab a little bit of the waterproof glue on the bottom edge, and fill the hole. Drive it down with my mallet. I'll trim it flush, sand it down, and it'll blend in perfectly with the rest of the project. So there it is. I wonder what it'll look like out in the garden. You know, our garden bench has only been sitting out here for a couple months, and this is what it's starting to look like, and it's only going to get better. Now, next time, we're going to build this entertainment center made from cherry veneer plywood and solid cherry for the doors and face frames. Inside, there's plenty of room for a VCR, a CD, and even a good-sized TV. You won't want to miss it next time, right here on the New Yankee Workshop.
The New Yankee Workshop is made possible by Parks Corporation, makers of safe and simple, environmentally responsible stains and finishes that enrich, protect, and preserve the natural beauty of wood.
Ace Hardware, helpful hardware men and women dedicated to providing service, selection, and friendly advice. The things you need and need to know. Ace is the place. And by Vermont American, the blades, the bits, the tools to make American workmanship better. Vermont American, the power in power tool accessories.
If you would like a measured drawing of the English Garden Bench, please send $7.50 to English Garden Bench, care of the New Yankee Workshop, Box 645, Bedford, Mass. 01730.
This is PBS.
The New Yankee Workshop projects are now available on home video. To order your copy of the project you've just seen, you may call 0280. Please have your credit card ready. Each home video includes a measured drawing and a materials list with all the dimensions you will need to build your project. The price for this home video is $24.95 plus shipping and handling. This week, the Gentle Doctor will profile the mermaid of the sea, the manatee. This sea mammal is facing extinction, and we'll learn what's being done to stop this tragedy. And how can you prevent your pet from ingesting something as innocent as a paperclip? Pets have swallowed unbelievable objects, and you'll learn how to pet-proof your house. Also, breeding and research facilities for exotic birds are becoming quite sophisticated. We'll visit one and discuss having these birds as pets. The Gentle Doctor is made possible in part by Henry Schein Incorporated, serving the needs of healthcare professionals for more than half a century. By St. John Laboratories. St. John is the supplier of CET home dental care products for pets. And by Lick Your Chops, creators of Optimum Nutrition products. Lick Your Chops formulates clinical diets based on bionutritional analysis available through veterinarians.
This particular sculpture chosen by this zoo illustrates the prospect and hope that the dwindling numbers of Florida's manatees will be protected. These creatures once filled the state's rivers and estuaries, but like the buffalo of the western plains, they were nearly hunted to extinction for their meat. In the 1700s, British sailors declared Florida a manatee sanctuary, but it was not until the early 1970s that these animals fell under the umbrellas of the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. These laws make it illegal to hunt, harass, or in any way harm manatees. But the solution to the manatee's plight rests with man. Only a cooperative effort by all will ensure the survival of one of nature's most gentle creatures.
Barely breaking the water's surface except to breathe, this massive aquatic creature is a victim of its own good nature and slow ways. Once mistaken by lonesome sailors for beautiful temptresses, manatees were the origin for many mermaid legends. But at a closer glance, the manatee resembles less a beautiful siren and more its closest land relative, the elephant.
The front flipper of a manatee, the rudimentary nails are very similar to those of an elephant. Its upper lip, in fact, is very prehensile-like. It can actually reach out, grab a hold of plants, draw that into its mouth, and that is also similar to the elephant's trunk, and that's very manipulative. It can grab a hold of things and so forth.
The West Indian manatee once ranged as far as South America. Today, this manatee is found almost exclusively in Florida's rivers and coastal waters. The remaining population of the species is around 1,200 animals. Last year, more than 130 manatees were found dead. Natural causes claimed the lives of some, but many more died as a result of man.
The biggest one single threat to the manatee is development of our shorelines and not leaving a buffer for nature. It's so necessary that man and manatee do survive and coexist these rivers. We don't own the rivers, we're only stewards. And we have to take care of them as if it was something we're borrowing from somebody and try to give it back the same way we got it.
Man's carelessness in all its forms is taking its toll on the manatee population. Because these creatures are slow-moving, they are often unable to avoid collisions with barges or motorboats. Such collisions often leave manatees fatally injured or, at the very least, permanently maimed. Manatees have a 2-inch protective layer of skin and fat, and oftentimes survive run-ins with boats, but survival rarely comes without a price. Here at the Miami Seaquarium, veterinarians and the Seaquarium staff work at saving stranded and injured manatees.
This is a very typical injury that we see. This is a boat impact injury, and what essentially happens is the boat hits the manatee and causes internal damage. In this case, it was multiple rib fractures, and the fractures, the fracture ends punctured the lung.
Upon recovery, manatees are released back into the wild, but for some, recovery is slow, if at all. Homosassa Springs State Park, just north of Tampa, allows veterinarians and researchers to observe recovering and captive-born manatees in their natural environment. But even more important, the public is given the opportunity to come and learn about them and their habitat.
And we try to educate people to not to harm these manatees and even not feed them in the wild, as this can bring them closer to the boats in the wild and cause them injuries. They have been here far longer than human beings, and they have as much right or more right to these rivers than we do. Plus, they do provide us a service. If there were more of these manatees in the rivers, they would keep the rivers as clean as what you see here in our springs.
Manatees do not have a designated mating season, and calves may be born year-round. Here in Homosassa Springs, manatees thrive and successfully reproduce. Captive breeding is so successful that some experts feel that it may be the only alternative for saving the species.
A lot of African animals only survive now in parks, such as the Wildlife Park in San Diego. And maybe that's going to be the manatees. I hate to see that. It should be a wild thing, but they do migrate quite long areas, and they're going to compete with man, and when you compete with man, you lose.
Imaginations and stories told by conquistadors at sea, of mermaids and their siren songs beckoning, "Come to me." Oh, manatee, slow and gentle friend, your children may never be. Your voice will be silent on silent shores, a loss to humanity. Education, the experts say, may be the only key that we may hear your voice again for all eternity.
Hello, I'm Dr. Deborah Edwards, and this handsome gentleman is Angelo. Everyone loves a fat cat. We all assume that a heavy cat is a happy and contented cat. Unfortunately, obesity in the cat is just as dangerous as it is in people. It can cause or worsen conditions such as arthritis, heart and lung disease, and diabetes. Overweight cats have lowered resistance to infectious diseases and decreased exercise tolerance. In other words, if your cat is obese, he will be sick more often and have a shortened lifespan. If you're concerned about your cat's weight, consult your veterinarian. There are reducing diets available that allow your cat to lose weight while still eating the same volume. Playing with toys can help supplement your cat's daily exercise. Your cat's weight loss program will require your total commitment, but in return you will have a happier and healthier cat.
It reads like something out of Ripley's Believe It or Not. A 10-pound puppy swallows a 7-inch steak knife and lives. Sounds strange enough to make anyone a disbeliever. Ingesting objects like a steak knife are hardly appetizing to any pet. However, there are countless cases when dogs and cats swallow foreign objects, which can lead to a life-threatening situation. Like children, animals are curious and sample the world with their noses and mouths. And sometimes they swallow the incredible indigestible.
Pixie is a very friendly, going dog. She's very happy with everyone. And the idea that she could even pick up a knife. Being at that age, I have never in mind to think that possibly that it would swallow it. And believe it, she did.
In January of 1989, this German Shepherd English Bull Mix was not being her usual playful self, with good reason.
As the week went by, she started to weaken where she lost control of her legs. And I knew that Friday I had to take her in to see Dr. Helm. And with all that in mind, that evening around 9:20 at night, Dr. Helm called me and told me that Pixie had swallowed a 7-inch steak knife. And I just, at first, did not believe it. But it was there.
Pixie's case was a unique one and fortunately had a happy ending. Dogs, as well as cats, are curious by nature and sample the world with their noses and mouths. Common items that are often swallowed and need removal are coins, paper clips, thumbtacks, chicken bones, and needles.
Any object that an animal could pick up and swallow could be a potential problem. Common things would be baby bottle nipples, plastic bags, hosiery socks, small toys, anything that could lodge and cause an obstruction, a partial obstruction, or perforate an intestinal loop or bowel. No matter what, an animal can swallow anything. So it means just to be careful and watch your animal. Make sure what you have around the house isn't for them to be, to get hurt.
No matter how easy it might be for a cat or dog to swallow a foreign object, removing it can be very difficult and even life-threatening. Surgery may be required, but there are other techniques being used.
Endoscopy is a non-invasive tool where you can get a look into the inside of the body non-invasively, that is, without actually making an incision to look. It's a fiber optics, which uses lens and light in a flexible tube where you insert it into the mouth and you can go down the throat and look into the stomach. It can be used to maybe retrieve a small object or to take a biopsy sample.
At the University of California, Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Kimberly Robertson treats many cases using endoscopy.
The scope's really a nice way to go down and get them out, and you have to avoid a major surgery, which would have a long hospitalization possibly, and sutures, and animals that will traumatize their sutures, and the chance of infection and things like that. So this is a nice, really non-invasive way of going down and looking for the object and trying to take it out. Last week we pulled a popsicle stick out of a puppy that had swallowed a popsicle stick. So it's a really good method that we've been able to use and get a lot more accurate using and try to get these objects out of these animals.
Because pets cannot always be supervised indoors and out, they may eat something without the owner knowing it.
In most cases, that foreign body, even a needle or that is very sharp, doesn't immediately puncture the esophagus or the stomach. So the owner sees the dog or cat ingest this foreign body, and yet the animal showing no clinical signs. They should take their pet either to their veterinarian if it's during the day or to an emergency clinic if it's at night. Because at that point, the animal needs to have x-rays taken, determine where the foreign body is, and determine what is the most appropriate means of dealing with it.
Some signs to watch for are loss of appetite, frequent vomiting, and changes in behavior. In the event an animal swallows a foreign object, proper first aid is the key.
I recommend to pet owners that they not do anything other than take their animal to their veterinarian or to an emergency clinic. They specifically should not try to make the animal vomit. If their dog or cat has swallowed a needle or a thumbtack or a fish hook or some other sharp object of that type, trying to make their animal vomit can make problems worse.
Provide your pet with a safe environment by removing small objects that could be swallowed. Pet-proof your home just as you would child-proof it. By taking a few simple precautions, you may save yourself and your pet a trip to your veterinarian.
When you're selecting a purebred dog,
You're not buying a puppy, you're buying a dog. You'll be living with that dog for 10 to 15 years. And all too often people buy an impulse or they buy a puppy because it's cute. You want to think of this puppy a year from now. That's what you'll be living with. And when you're going to select a breed, do your homework. It's a long-term relationship. It's going to be a lot of money. And you want to make sure you're getting the best for your dollar. The way to do that is research the breed. Now, this is an American Eskimo dog. Now, if you look at the hair, I mean, it makes them adorable. They look like a stuffed toy. But this is going to shed a lot. You look at this puppy now, think about the dog, and do you want to put up with that shedding? Or are you going to be willing to spend the time for the grooming it's going to need to maintain it? It's important that you do your homework to find out the different breed characteristics because they all differ. Let's say with this little Cairn Terrier. Well, terriers love to dig. You plan on leaving the dog out in the backyard? You're going to get holes, so it's a factor that you really want to know about. And a good place to get that information is contact your local or national breed clubs. The Cairn Terrier Club of America will send you information not only on where to find reputable breeders, but the information about the breed. If you do your homework and make a proper selection, you'll have a companion that will be trustworthy with your children and will be a wonderful pet for 10 to 15 years. It's a long-term relationship. Put the footwork in so you make sure you make the proper selection. The beauty of a bird's feathers and the magic of their flight have always amazed mankind. In ages past, only royalty could afford to keep and care for exotic creatures. But today, 8% of American households own a pet bird. This demand for avian pets is changing many veterinary practices, as well as the sources the birds are coming from.
More than 8,600 species of birds inhabit the earth. The variety of their forms and their habits is remarkable. People have always kept these fascinating creatures as pets, but their popularity as companions is growing.
They're so tame and they're so affectionate, and they're not like any other animal I've ever had before. They like to get close when I let them out. They'll fly around for a little while, but then they want to be really very close to you. They want to be right there. They're totally trusting of you, and just very affectionate and fun. I didn't really realize how pleasant they are as pets until I actually got these two and became so close to them because they're very tame.
In the past, parakeets and finches were common choices for pets. But today, larger, more exotic birds are often chosen. Whatever the species, these creatures can make good pets.
I think with the urbanization of populations, the working mothers, people are looking for pets that are easy to take care of, but still have a strong bonding to their owners. And I think pet birds definitely fall into this category. They make ideal pets, especially if they're captive bred. More and more facilities are popping up all over the country for captive breeding. And in the future, the supply for the pet bird market is definitely going to be moving more and more toward the captive bred bird rather than the imported bird.
One such facility is the Aviculture Breeding and Research Center, located in southeast Florida. Covering 40 acres, the center is home to over 1,000 rare birds, plus its owner and founder, Richard Schubach.
I started about 6.5 years ago by accidentally going out and buying a bird. And from that it led to another and another and another and another. And then it led to education and the realization that before very long there will be no birds in the wild, and the only way our children would ever see one of these birds could possibly be in a museum as a stuffed bird with a tape to hear how it sounds.
The center employs a staff of 40 to provide for the birds' care. Along with quarantine aviaries and a nursery, there is a fully equipped hospital for treatment of birds who are sick or injured. The growth of knowledge in the field of avian medicine has contributed to the health of these patients.
The Association of Avian Veterinarians was founded in 1980, and since that time it has become the fastest growing special interest group in the history of veterinary medicine. There are now over 2,000 members, and they're specialists in avian medicine all over the country. So there's been a phenomenal increase in the amount of information, the techniques that are available to us, diagnostic tests, surgical procedures. All these things have evolved over a very short period of time.
At aviculture, many eggs from exotic species are hatched by surrogate chickens. However, some eggs are kept in carefully condition-controlled incubators. Occasionally, a hatching must be assisted. This Eclectus parrot chick was upside down in the yolk sac. The egg was opened to prevent its dying from asphyxiation. Avian pediatrics is an area where many things are still to be learned.
These chicks, when they come out of the eggs, may only weigh 10 grams, and their eyes are shut and their ears may not be open, and they have no way of standing up hardly, and they don't have any feathers on them unless it's a scant covering of down. So to try to understand and how to keep a little 10-gram animal alive and understand his growth patterns is difficult because we just don't know it. And to understand how to treat them and the diseases and the congenital problems, it's all